recognize anything here with the picture in the background? See? Love is something, if you give it away. There you go, Margie.
Thank you so much.
And I encourage you, whenever you have an opportunity, to take the love that's inside you and give it away. And today we're here to worship God. And what worshiping God is, giving your attention to something bigger than yourself. And that's like this whole community. Each one of us is alone, but all together we're much bigger. And that means we are not nearly so insignificant as we might imagine. And the key component of our gift to the community is the light of Jesus that is in us. And this is a symbol of that living light, which is the life of God in us. And today we want to celebrate by taking all the stuff that hinders the love of God, just putting it down. Did you, rabbis used to say, you carry all your stuff under here? Lift up your hands and let that stuff fall down. So we're here to worship God together. Some of you will remember these words. Smile, an everlasting smile. A smile can bring you near to me. Don't ever let me find you gone, because that would bring a tear to me. This world has lost its glory. Let's start a brand new story. Now, my love, right now. There'll be no other time, and I can show you how, my love. It's only words, and words are all I have to take your heart away. That was the Bee Gees, not apostolic, but very insightful. And anybody who took time to look at that poem would discover it rich in meaning about our relationship as human beings and our relationship with our Creator. Now, I have another text that I like to read, and this is not quite as poetic, but it is very significant. And this is from a man named Thomas Hobbes, and he wrote it in 1651. And I will suggest to you that Thomas Hobbes is one of the architects of the modern world, and in a particular way, he is one of the architects of capitalism. He says, to be conspicuous, that is to say, to be known for wealth, for office, great actions, or any eminent good is honorable, as a sign of the power for which he is conspicuous. On the contrary, obscurity is dishonorable. To be descended from conspicuous parents is honorable, because they the more easily attain the aids and friends than their ancestors. On the contrary, to be descended from obscure parentage is dishonorable. Covetousness, and covetousness is from the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet. Covetousness is of great riches, and ambition, and great honors are honorable, as signs of power to obtain them. Covetousness and ambition of little gains or preferments is dishonorable. What Mr. Hobbes has done is he's taken the world and looked at it with a critical, objective eye, noticed the way people actually lived in his time, and suggested that the wealthy were the honorable and the poor were the dishonorable. The people with no reputation, dishonorable. People with great reputation, honorable. Now I'd like to speak to you a little bit about another point of view, a more ancient point of view, a point of view that we celebrate as a community of faith here and in company of persons who have celebrated this story through all the ages. And this is a story that begins with two boys. One is named Jesus, and he's from Nazareth. The other is named Saul, and he's from Tarsus. And if you remember, one day in the Bible, there's a story about Jesus at the age of 12 going to the temple, and the leaders being very impressed with the intelligence and the insight of this young boy. But you see, he's the son of peasants, of artisans. So when he goes away, he doesn't go up into prominence or honor or glory or power. He goes to be a common laborer. Now the scripture doesn't mention this, but Saul of Tarsus at the age of 12 probably also had such an interview with the leaders of the community. And he also was no doubt noticed for his insight, his intelligence, and all those character attributes that suggested he had a promising future. Now when Jesus grows up, he goes about comforting people who are afflicted. That is to say, people who are suffering. And they're suffering from all kinds of things, and he brings remedy however he is able. Saul, in the meanwhile, is growing up to be a prominent leader in the Jewish community centered in the temple at Jerusalem. Saul becomes an exceptionally prominent man. He has got everything that Mr. Hobbes suggests signifies worth. And of course, then when we look at Jesus wandering about, homeless, nothing, daily bread, trusting God, we see somebody who, from Hobbes' point of view, has little or no worth whatsoever. But the story of Jesus and Saul goes on. Jesus ends up suffering because of the intercessions he makes for the poor of the land, the broken of the land, the despised of the land, all those persons whom Mr. Hobbes has called dishonorable, unworthy. Jesus says, in God's sight, you are worth every bit as much as any other human being. Now, Jesus gets killed for this, but because of the way he acted among the population, they were encouraged, and they were strengthened, and they began to practice what he was teaching them. They began to practice loving kindness. They began to practice mutuality. They began to celebrate the idea that as human beings, we're all in this together. Now, these were considered by the elites of the land to be dishonorable people, unworthy people, and nobody was more irate about them than Saul. And Saul was going about doing everything he could to shut these people up. This whole business of God preferring the poor. And Jesus' story about the rich man and Lazarus, it's a story not about something miraculous or superstitious or supernatural. It's a story about how we live life on this planet. And Jesus comes down with a very clear verdict. The rich man in the story expects that when God welcomes him into the heavenly places, he's going to be celebrated. He is so honorable. He is so powerful. He is so rich. But surprise, surprise, he's not welcome. He's sent to another place. Maybe a place where he can think about his life a little bit. But the poor beggar by the rich man's door is welcomed into Abraham's bosom. What we have is a teaching from Jesus about the way of God, which suggests that God is doing everything possible to include the poor, to include the broken, to include the lost, to include the despised. And this should be ringing some bells in your minds as we think about what is happening in the world just now. It should make some suggestion about what our priorities might be if we want to be followers of Jesus rather than followers of Thomas Hobbes. Now, the interesting thing about Jesus and Saul is that their names go way back, because it's Jesus from the tribe of Judah and it's Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. And if you remember in the early days when the monarchy was first established, Saul was chosen to be king because he stood head and shoulders above everybody. He was an honorable and a worthy man. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. They were an aristocratic, urban people. David, who Samuel, the prophet, said was going to replace Saul, was from Judah. And Judah was a despised tribe in many ways. They were poor, they lived close to the land, they were shepherds. But the story shows us Saul trying to get rid of David in exactly the same way as Saul of Tarsus is trying to get rid of the influence of Jesus. And the point I want to make, that there's a theme in the Bible which is consistent from beginning to end, and it has to do with the relationship of those who have and those who have not. And it's a story about how God is seeking balance in the universe. Now, the sad thing about all this is that Thomas Hobbes has captured the imagination of the modern world, so that the real struggle in our society from our grandparents' time, and now it's in full flower, has been the struggle to get more. And one of the examples would be, when you grew up, you probably lived in a fairly small and a modest home. You may have lived on the land where you had to work with the land to get your daily bread. But today, what do the young folks want? A 3,000 square foot home for which they are willing to go deeply into debt, so that they both have to work almost day and night just to cover their costs. And that is considered by the powers of this world to be the good life. I want you to know that the good life consists in simplicity, in plainness, in living close to the earth, in touch with the earth. That is to say, we might be well advised as modern people to spend at least as much time in our gardens as we spend in the malls. To spend as much time simply being in the streets and in the community events as a good neighbor who shares kindness, who shares support, who shares encouragement. These things will bring about change in our world. Now, what I am saying to you are words. And while I was thinking about how I might speak, I realized that there's one thing I did not want to do. I did not want to persuade you that I know the truth about life and you don't. You have a perspective. What I want you to do is to think about what kind of principles are governing our world. And I would like it if you decided that the principles represented in the likes of Mr. Thomas Hobbes and the principles represented in the likes of a person like Jesus are so different that it means making a real choice. You can't blend these two things. And the thing is, when Paul in his letter, because Paul has an experience, remember? He's on his high horse. It was interesting that they put him on a horse, and you all know the saying about getting knocked off his high horse. Well, Paul is smitten with an insight. And the insight is, oh no, all of us priests, all of us prophets, all of us people who serve the temple have got it wrong. Jesus has got it right. It's not about wealth. It's not about power. It's not about the best things. It's about neighborliness. It's about love. It's about compassion. And Paul turns his life around. You do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. That's what a preacher is aiming for folks to reconsider their priorities and begin to adopt those things which will lead to a future that is healthy and happy. And I say this again and again, in the words of the Cree people, the world is happy and healthy for the 7th generation. That is to say, we now are going to say we want to work and invest our lives in a future that is not ruining the earth, that is not taking advantage of people, that is not oppressing people, that is not making war, that is not making money off of making war. We don't want that world anymore. So I'm hoping you're going to struggle, and I'm hoping you're going to wrestle. One of my favorite texts in the Bible, and it's probably what would be called my hermeneutical key, or the key that I use to interpret the scriptures, is Jacob one night wrestling with an angel. And he says to the angel, I won't let you go till you bless me. The messages of God, the words, the weak and impotent words of God, offer you an opportunity to wrestle in your spirit with what your priorities and commitments are going to be. And it may be simply saying, I'm going to do dishes at church next Sunday. I'm going to be there to set up things. I'm going to bake cookies for my neighbors. That is to say, I'm hoping you'll wrestle with the messages of God and decide to be creatively and courageously involved in making the vision of Jesus Christ the reality of human being, as opposed to the vision of Thomas Hobbes. May God help us to choose this new way of being in the world. Not a new way at all. People have been choosing it through all the generations. And I'm hoping we will choose it.